Yeah, I've got it made. Marrying into money. You can keep struggling in your poor life, James said with a sneer and a smirk. He threw these mean words at me just as I was relaxing in the hotel lobby. James's loud voice made me feel bad. I wondered where he had met his new wife, who happened to be the daughter of the president of Richard Enterprises. James seemed proud and childish to me, laughing like a middle-aged man. When I heard Richard Enterprises, it sounded familiar. I remembered details about the company and smiled. Meanwhile, James was happy, but I struggled to hold back a laugh. My name is Linda, and I'm 37 years old. I live with my husband, James. I work in my family's real estate business, mostly doing administrative tasks. My father is the president and manages the key strategies. Since I'm an only child, I'm expected to take over the company one day. I feel the pressure of becoming the president, but I've been careful not to talk too much about our family business with James. James only finished high school and works in a moving company. He feels inferior because of this, even though moving heavy items requires skill and strength. I respect his work, but I avoid mentioning my prestigious university degree or my future role as president when we talk. James and I met through a friend in college. She hired James's moving company, and he helped with her move. Initially, James was interested in my friend. How we met was kind of funny. James was interested in someone else, but she was already in a relationship. They got along well, so she introduced him to me. I was looking for a partner at the time. Our meeting was unexpected, but it turned out great. James's carefree nature matched my meticulous personality. After going on several dates, we became a couple when I was in my late 20s, a good age for marriage. Within a year, we were married. My life as James's wife began without any problems. His parents were very kind and always welcomed me with smiles when we visited. Considering the issues my friends had with their mothers-in-law, I felt lucky to have such a good relationship with mine. However, James's job was demanding, and he often worked late, which was tiring for him. Despite being tired, he never neglected our marriage. I felt grateful, but also thought he didn't need to try so hard. He thanked me for simply making dinner after his long work days. I felt blessed to have such a wonderful husband. But after a year of peaceful marriage, things started to change. One night, as we got into bed, James casually asked, "Why can't we have kids?" His tone was slightly irritated, which surprised me. I had also thought about having children, but we weren't actively trying. Given our regular marital life, I believed it would happen in time. I tried to reassure James, saying, "It's just bad timing. We've only been married a year, so it's not something to worry about yet." I definitely wanted children, but I knew rushing wouldn't help. James seemed more forceful than usual, even quoting statistics like 60% chance of conceiving within a year for couples not using contraception. Not being familiar with pregnancy statistics, that number seemed incredibly high to me. James was eager for kids and suggested we get tested together to identify and address any clear issues. I suggested we both get fertility tests, but James's response surprised me. He said, "What are you talking about? Are you saying it's my fault? Infertility is usually the woman's fault. There's no point in me getting tested." His tone was disrespectful, which shocked me. I hadn't accused him of anything. I simply suggested testing since we didn't know where the issue was yet. James assumed I was blaming him and added, "It's definitely the woman's fault," as if I was the problem. I wanted to say more, but I was shaking and could barely reply. James said, "Just you get tested. I'm too busy with work." He insulted me, saying, "You're just a placeholder office lady, right? Just coasting along in a company thanks to your dad's connections." I do a lot of administrative work now, but I'm also learning management skills from my father for when I take over the company. I'm constantly trying to prove myself, and it's tough dealing with the higher-ups. James just doesn't understand my struggles. That night, it seemed pointless to argue with him. Any word I said was met with sharp replies. We went to sleep back to back, and the atmosphere was heavy. From that day, James's attitude towards me completely changed. One evening, after a late talk with my father about the future, I came home to find James berating me for not having dinner ready. I apologized, explaining that I had just gotten home and would start cooking. James muttered, "That's typical of a small company boss's daughter." He didn't know, but my father's real estate company was not small at all, with hundreds of employees. But I knew arguing this point was meaningless. "I'll cook right away. Have a drink and wait," I told James. He loved his alcohol. It seemed to calm him down. Relying on alcohol to maintain our relationship made me sad. I hated being scolded by him. If alcohol could make him feel better even a bit, then it was worth it. The next morning, James's mood hadn't improved. "Make sure dinner's ready when I get home," he spat as he left. I sighed, thinking about my plans for the day. I had taken the day off to visit the gynecologist for fertility testing, as previously mentioned by James. Although I was the one who initially suggested the testing, the fact that only I was undergoing it while James refused was something I found hard to accept. But complaining wouldn't change anything. If the issue was with me, I needed to start infertility treatment promptly. James had been wanting kids, and I too hoped for a child soon. I knew fertility rates differ between the 30s and 40s, so sooner was better for treatment. The clinic was busier than expected, and I was called in for examination an hour after registration. After undergoing a physical examination and blood tests, I was told that the results would be available during my next visit. It would be a shock if the issue was with me, but I was prepared for any necessary steps, no matter the outcome. I resolved not to lose heart. I went for the fertility test today. I told James when he came home from work, Figures. If the problem's with you, testing's the right thing to do. Let me know the results as soon as you get them," he replied. James's belief that I was the cause of our infertility frustrated me. The fertility testing required much time and effort. A bit of understanding from him would have been welcome. 6 years passed, and I turned 37. Though we continued our efforts to conceive, we remained childless, and James seemed to have given up on having a child with me. His late nights increased, and sometimes he didn't come home at all. When asked, he said he was out drinking with colleagues, then singing karaoke till morning. His behavior was more akin to a college student's, deeply exasperating me. My work had become busier, and the thought of starting a family was pushed aside. But James's recent actions were too much. His lack of concern for our home life was clear. One day, after James went out on his day off, I noticed he'd left his smartphone in the living room. He forgot to take it with him, so I picked it up to take it to his room. His phone rang, showing the name Sandra on the caller ID. Assuming it was a work contact, I answered to inform them that James had forgotten his phone at home. "Hey James, you're late. I've been waiting for 50 minutes. Where are you? If you don't hurry, we'll miss the park opening," said a flirty voice on the phone. The word date made me catch my breath. I quickly ended the call. Who was this woman? She mentioned a date, so she likely wasn't a colleague. He's cheating on me, I realized, holding undeniable proof of James's infidelity. I clenched his phone tightly. Sandra had said it was a long-awaited date, indicating a long-term affair. I trembled with indescribable anger. While I was struggling with infertility, James was carelessly cheating on me. His recent distance now made sense. He no longer needed me. Unforgivable. Determined to make James pay, I started collecting evidence of his infidelity. It wasn't hard to gather proof. First, I easily unlocked his smartphone using his birth date. The call history was filled with Sandra's name. When I opened the messaging app, I found numerous messages between James and Sandra, filled with embarrassingly affectionate words that made me feel nauseated. I took photos of this evidence with my phone. After placing James's phone back in his room, I spent the day as if nothing happened. After a month of a strange marriage, my father, the company president, summoned me to his office. I have something important to discuss with you, he said gravely. Shocked by his words, I couldn't believe what I heard. Is that true? I asked. Yes, so I'm counting on you, he replied. Disturbed, I returned to my office, barely concentrating on work. That evening, James suggested we separate. Having found evidence of his affair, I had been contemplating when to bring up divorce, but him initiating it saved me the hassle. Yes, let's divorce, I said. James seemed surprised. Perhaps he was happy about being able to be with his mistress, a woman named Sandra. His face was filled with an unmistakable joy that I found irritating. Despite my irritation with James's expression, I signed the divorce papers he offered. I can file these tomorrow. I'll be leaving this house, he said. Okay, are you sure about the mortgage? I asked casually. Oh yes, I'm fine, James replied. James's job was demanding but not high-paying. I doubted he could handle the mortgage alone. But since he initiated the divorce and was the one cheating, I felt no obligation to help. I packed and left the house 3 days later, moving back to my parents' house nearby. My parents initially seemed concerned when I told them about my divorce, but when I explained that James had cheated on me, they became furious. They repeatedly reassured me that it was the right decision to part ways with such a man. I threw myself into work, trying to forget about James. Before I realized it, a year had flown by. I was so engrossed in my work that I lost sight of everything else. One day, while relaxing in the living room, my dad approached me. Why don't you take a break and go on a trip? It's going to get busy starting next month, he said. I guess he thought I'd been working too hard and needed a distraction. Indeed, I had been overwhelmed with various things lately and felt mentally exhausted. Thinking a little trip wouldn't hurt, I took up Dad's suggestion and decided to travel to the Northeast. It was my first solo trip, and I was both nervous and excited. The air in the Northeast was crisp and seemed to cleanse my weary soul. Interacting with the locals who helped me navigate and chatting with the owner of a bar, I found everyone to be incredibly kind, which gradually healed my spirit. I had booked a hotel in Portland, the most famous and largest around here, thinking, why not enjoy the trip to the fullest? After checking in, I relaxed in the lobby with a welcome drink. The fatigue from the journey seemed to melt away. Feeling utterly comfortable, I jokingly considered moving to Portland. A familiar voice called out, "Hey, what are you doing here?" I turned around, startled by the unmistakable voice of my ex-husband, James, who was entering the lobby with 2 large suitcases and a young woman. She appeared to be in her early 20s, with flawless skin, bold makeup, and striking red nails. Despite the chilly northeast weather, she was wearing a short skirt with bare legs. Startled, I stared at James and the woman. "Why are you here, and who is she?" I blurted out, even though I didn't really want to know. "Oh, let me introduce you. This is Sandra, my new wife. We're on our honeymoon. Guess what? She's a wealthy businessman's daughter," James said, his tone full of happiness. He volunteered information I hadn't asked for, but Sandra was the name of the person on the phone. Disgusted that he was with such a young girl, I felt a surge of discomfort. "You're on a solo trip here. That's pathetic," James sneered, despite being the one who cheated and initiated our divorce. Sandra, too, was looking at me, her eyes narrowed with amusement. "Hey, James, is this your ex-wife? She looks old." "Hurry up with the check-in," she said in a catty tone. I glared at Sandra and James, nonchalantly wrapping an arm around her waist, responded, "Yeah, I'm set for life, marrying into money. You can keep struggling in your poor life." James smirked condescendingly, throwing demeaning words my way. His high-pitched voice echoed through the hotel lobby, disrupting the elegant atmosphere I was enjoying and leaving me feeling upset. But his mention of marrying a businessman's daughter made me wonder where he had met someone like that. "Yeah, Sandra is the daughter of Richard Enterprises," James proudly exclaimed. I thought it sounded familiar somehow. "Oh, right, that company," I said after a moment, recalling what Richard Enterprises was. James's face lit up with pride. Impressive, huh? He exclaimed. But inside, I was holding back laughter. Come on, you know this company. Her family's loaded, and they even paid off the mortgage on that house quickly. Thanks for divorcing me so easily, Linda, James said sarcastically, but it didn't bother me at all. Yeah, I know them. They're in the biggest building downtown, right? I've seen it and even been there, I replied calmly. Oh, you've been there? James seemed surprised. It's quick then. Her family owns a huge company, so they're loaded. Breaking up with you was the right choice, James smirked nastily, but I simply nodded, still calm. That building, it's part of our real estate holdings, I mentioned casually, as if I just remembered. James and Sandra both asked in unison, What do you mean by our real estate? That building is rented by my father for his most prestigious office. I don't know if your company is involved in real estate, but it's not a shabby building, I explained. Both seemed skeptical of my words. I hesitated for a moment, but there was no turning back now. Telling James about my company wasn't my concern anymore, now that we were divorced and his pride was no longer my concern. Yes, I know how grand it is. I was there when my father bought that building. It was about $400 million, I think. But recently, Dad was complaining about a tenant not paying their rent. Turns out it was your company. In fact, my father is a real estate magnate with assets worth $5.3 billion. The building Richard Enterprises is in is one of them. The tenants of the building change regularly, but currently it's Richard Enterprises. For the past few months, they hadn't paid their rent, and that's what was troubling my father, I explained. Sandra looked shocked, but then she burst out laughing. That can't be true. Our company's doing great. We can surely pay the rent. I'm not falling for such a lame lie to drive a wedge between James and me, she said in a shrill voice. I let out a deep sigh. It seemed like a reasonable conversation with this woman was impossible. Pulling out my smartphone, I decided to call my dad. Dad, I'm here with the daughter of Richard Enterprises. Can you send me a photo of the reminder notice for the rent? I quickly relayed my request, and Dad sent a photo of the rent reminder notice for Richard Enterprises. Showing it to James and Sandra, I doubted they could suspect it was a fake, given the speed. See, you can tell, right? 4 months of unpaid rent. If you don't pay soon, we might have to sue. What are you going to do? At the mention of a lawsuit, James and Sandra's faces turned pale. Come to think of it, Dad has been really on edge lately, yelling about sales and firing a lot of employees, Sandra mumbled, sounding unsure. Seeing her, James shouted in despair, Lies. You're just trying to trick us and tear Sandra and me apart, aren't you? You're still that kind of person, trying to get back at me for remarrying. Your tactics are dirty. Startled by James's loud voice, I took a step back. Dirty tactics, huh? I recalled all the heartless words James had hurled at me during our marriage. Then I readied myself, determined to confront James, who was now gloating about marrying Sandra, a wealthy businessman's daughter. I readied myself to tell him the truth. What are you even saying? Do you really think I still have feelings for you? How foolish. I've long been fed up with a man like you. In fact, I've been feeling sorry for Sandra, who got caught up with you. Did you marry her just for her money? You married me for shallow reasons too, like wanting to get married quickly or wanting kids. And who was it that left me when he found out we couldn't have kids? Who insulted me, calling me useless for being infertile? You're to blame for all of it, yet you think I still like you? You must be out of your mind, I said, feeling a wave of relief as I unleashed my pent-up frustrations on James. James, on the other hand, seemed infuriated, trembling with anger. You're just an arrogant old hag. You probably can't even get married or have kids anymore. Sandra and I were planning to have fun making a baby after this trip, and now you're accusing Richard Enterprises of not paying rent. Panicked upon realizing the poor performance of Richard Enterprises, James was desperate to blame all his misfortunes on me. I decided to deliver the final blow to James, saying, "Oh." I didn't mention it, but I'm 6 months pregnant. I'm in the stable phase of my pregnancy, so Dad suggested I take this trip to relax. Of course, I have my doctor's permission. That's right. After divorcing James, I found a new love. He was my boss at work, a subordinate of my father. He supported me mentally when I was struggling and encouraged me. He also supported me fully at work and was in favor of me becoming the next CEO. I found out I was pregnant with his child just 4 months ago. Knowing about the baby, I immediately married him. It was a quick marriage, but the company celebrated it grandly. My pregnancy was going smoothly, and encouraged by my father and husband, I embarked on this trip. Just before breaking up with James, my father had told me he was retiring as CEO next month. He decided to retire after being diagnosed with diabetes and thinking it was time to step down. Therefore, I would inherit my father's assets. This made it easier for me to accept the divorce from James. Even without James, I knew I could live a full life. The word pregnant slipped effortlessly from my lips, leaving James shouting, "What? You're pregnant? So were you using birth control when we were married? What's going on?" James stomped his feet in complete confusion. Birth control? I never did that. Remember, I told you I had infertility tests at the clinic, and they found no issues. So the problem was with you, I told James bluntly. His face twisted visibly. Does that mean Sandra and I can't have kids? Why did I divorce you and marry Sandra? James muttered to himself, shoulders slumped in defeat. What do you mean, why? I feel betrayed knowing you're infertile, Sandra snapped, angry at James's selfish reasoning. Realizing I couldn't bother with them anymore, I said my final words. That's why from now on, please don't involve yourself with me and Sandra. I have nothing more to say regarding the rent for Richard Enterprises. I won't back down until it's fully paid. If you plan to continue renting that building, please pay the overdue rent soon. Otherwise, we'll have to take legal action. I have nothing more to say to you two, so goodbye. I left James and Sandra arguing and confidently walked back to my hotel room. After returning from my trip, my husband greeted me with a smile, saying, "Welcome back. Sorry I couldn't help around the house. Was everything okay?" "Of course, it was fine. I'm glad you got to relax," I replied. "Thank you." My husband smiled warmly at me, and I felt a great sense of relief. Since marrying my current husband, I've been reassured every day, completely forgetting about James. Since that trip, I haven't met James. The following is what I heard through my father's contacts. After that incident, James and Sandra's fights became incessant. Despite thinking he was marrying a wealthy heiress, James discovered Richard Enterprises was in deep debt. Coincidentally, news was all over TV about a Richard Enterprises employee embezzling millions of dollars from clients. Sandra's father knew about the fraud, but tried to cover it up for the company's reputation. However, once the scandal became public, Richard Enterprises' stock plummeted. Having lost its credibility, the company saw a mass exodus of employees. In such a state, they couldn't possibly pay the rent, so my father was taking legal action against Richard Enterprises. The future of the company looked bleak, as it was entirely Richard Enterprises' fault. James, having lost a fortune he thought was within his grasp, was furiously blaming everyone but himself. Thinking he could ride on the coattails of a wealthy heiress was overly optimistic of James. Sandra, realizing James was infertile, accused him of marriage fraud. After our hotel encounter, I had a lawyer demand compensation from James for his infidelity, leaving both him and Sandra in debt. I heard that James and Sandra ended up arguing every time they saw each other, and they finally got divorced recently. Then, unbelievably, James called me after divorcing Sandra. "Linda, please marry me again. I have debts other than the alimony." Sandra made me buy everything she wanted and then left without paying a dime. You're the only one I can rely on. I'll do anything for you. Please forgive me. James's pleas sounded like a beggar, so pitiful that they almost made me sick. His unchanged attitude of marrying for money was just appalling. No, I have no desire to be involved with you ever again. I'm going to be happy with my husband and our child, so please don't contact me again. Goodbye, I said calmly, and then immediately had his phone number blocked. That should stop any more absurd calls from James. Having lost his wife and money, James will likely live a lonely life now. Given his infertility, remarriage might be difficult for him. Moreover, it's hard to imagine someone falling for a person like James, who mocks others so readily. All I could think was that he should at least try to repay his debts. I thought about it as if it were someone else's problem. As for me, I'm looking forward to my life with my husband and our soon-to-arrive baby. Both my work and personal life are more fulfilling than ever, and I'm savoring this unparalleled happiness.